Okay, so Ding's white, and he played in English again, and they got a new position like on move two. Okay, and here white played e4. Now I'm very familiar with this move because when I was growing up in Michigan in the 80s playing chess, one of the top players in Michigan for about 45 years was Paul Pochel, and he was between like 2250 and 2420 for like 50 years. And he played in the 1949 U.S. Championship. In 1963, he drew Bobby Fischer in the tournament, and he played in Michigan forever. He also lived in Illinois, but that was before I was born, so I don't know much about that. And Pochel always played this with white. He always played the English, and if you played the four knights, he would play e4. He didn't play g3 early. He would play this way. In fact, his game with Fischer was similar, but he actually played g3 earlier, and I think his knight went to e2. Okay, and I've played this on my stream like, I don't know, 2 days ago. I had this position. Maybe yesterday. And my opponent played bishop b4, which is the most common move. But GMs differ in whether bishop c5 is good or not. And so they play bishop c5 and bishop b4. They're both fine. Bishop b4 is the old move. I would say in the last 20 years, the recent theory is discussing this move. Okay, so he played bishop c5, which allows the quote-unquote fork trick with knight takes e5. And the idea is after knight takes, you play d4 and get your piece back. If you're a low-rated player, and you probably are, then you probably want to play bishop takes f2 and then take, so the king is exposed. But this is actually already winning for white. White has the two bishops, the big center, and white's king just goes back here, and black's position is terrible. Of course, when you're a beginner, you're taught to castle. So anytime you don't castle, you think that's bad. So you guys will sack a queen and two rooks and a bishop so the guy can't castle. And then you have no pieces left and you resign. Okay, so things like the center and two bishops are more important than castling. So he took the knight. This is all their preparation. d4. Bishop b4 is the main move now. Takes. And I had this position in Foxwoods 2 or 3 years ago, I think 2 years ago, against Talia Cervantes. And I didn't know the theory in this position. I played e4 on move 1. And we transposed into this somehow. And I played queen g4, which is a bad move. And I ended up winning the game. But that had nothing to do with the move. Then I later realized, after looking it up, queen f3 is the main move. And there's a Geary game with Carlsen. And to be perfectly frankly, I don't remember what color each one was. So there's a game Geary-Carlsen like this. But I don't know if Geary's white or Carlsen's white. I think that game was a draw. But okay, so queen f3 is the main move. Then knight c3. bc, and bishop goes to c5. Now, at first glance, white's pawn structure is quite bad. Also, at second glance, white's pawn structure is quite bad. And that is because white's pawn structure is quite bad. However, as Fabio likes to say, this is very concrete. Okay, so I guess if you hit your head on the chessboard, it would hurt. So queen g3 threatens the g7 pawn, and there's no good way to protect it. If you castle, bishop h6 just wins an exchange. You have to play g6. Rook g8 is ridiculous. g6 looks terrible. And so the best move, the move the engine gives, the move any grandmaster would make, is king f8. So it's funny how, making white play king takes f2 isn't good, and making black play king f8 is a little bit better because we haven't given anything away. We just have a bad pawn structure. But we're going to have a lead in development in the center and so forth. Okay, and black has to figure out a way to activate his rook at some point. And as Geary said 2 or 3 days ago on the broadcast, he said he thinks the bigger negative in not castling, king here, is not that your king is unsafe, but that your rook can't get out. So when you castle, your rook can go to e8, or white's rook can go to e1. If you castle queenside, your rook is already active. But okay, how's the rook ever going to get to this half-open file? And the answer is it doesn't. Okay, so bishop e2, and their players are both still in their preparation. d6, attacking the pawn, letting this bishop get out. We'd like to get rid of this e-pawn if we can. Bishop f4, very logical. And now, since it's basically impossible to get the rook to e8, Black decides to activate his rook where it is and plays the move h. I thought he played h5. Oh, he played h5 next move. He played queen e7, sorry, rook to d1, and now he played h5. And this sacrifices a pawn because in the resultant endgame, this is white's extra pawn. Frankly, terrible. And what Black wants to do is play h4. And if they trade everything on d6, the rook can get out h5 and start attacking these weak pawns. And white doesn't really want to go into this ending. White would prefer a middle game where the king is here and white's castled and played rook e1 and bishop f3, and white starts attacking and black's king is here. And when you have a bad pawn structure, you want a middle game, not an end game. In the middle game, who cares? My pawns are weak and I checkmated you and I took all your pieces. But in the end game, okay, then you're like, well, my pawns are all weak. That's not good. Okay, so h5, and this is still preparation. This is still theory. White can decide to take the pawn now. He decided not to and he castled because he doesn't want to go into that ending unless he has to. And for example, there's some complications now if Black doesn't play h4. Like, I'll show you a crazy line. Bishop d7, develop the bishop, get the rook out. Maybe the bishop goes here to c6. Then I can take. Then you could actually take my bishop, which isn't the best move, or maybe it is. It's totally insane. Then I take this. Triple pawns are 3 times as good. Now the bishop is attacked, and I have a pawn on the 7th rank. And the best move here is the only move. If you don't play this move, you have to resign. So this would be tough for Black. Black has to play h4. Put it in h. Okay, the queen doesn't want to be traded, so the queen goes to g5. There's not a lot of squares for the queen. Okay, and now the only move that doesn't lose is bishop takes f2 check. And if rook takes, I take this with check and take this. So you have to play king h1. Oh, I'm sorry. You can't play king h1. That's what I meant. You can't play king h1 because h3 wins. And now bishop c6 is coming, and this is coming, and you can't take my bishop because your rook is hanging. This is actually winning for Black. What you have to take this, and then you have to play rook f1. And now if you take this, you can't take your own bishop. That's why. Okay. I'm doing well this morning. I'm suggesting illegal moves and so forth. Okay, queen e2. Man, queen takes would have been a good move too. Bishop e5. White is down a rook. Okay, and the point of bishop e5 is if you play queen here check, I could block with the queen. And Black is okay. In fact, Black is winning. But after bishop e5, now I could check here because I blocked this. But your g-pawn is hanging. And the engine says rook h7, queen d8, rook takes, bishop e8. And amazingly, this position is considered equal. It's equal material, opposite bishops. White still has this bad pawn structure, but white has this nice pin. And the reason it's equal is because after check, bishop e7, which wins the bishop by force, I just play rook h6 and king h7. Now, obviously, if you have Black here, you would assume that you're completely losing. So you would never do this. But the engine says, no, this is a draw. Black's threatening mate. And the engine actually gets perpetual here. Queen check, perpetual. If you move your queen back to stop the mate, then queen takes bishop. So this is mate, and this is, and if you take, I have rook g6 check and queen g2 mate. So this is an amazing, like, forced line if you're two engines, or if you have really deep preparation. But it shows you bishop d7 is really dangerous, but playable. Okay, and Black doesn't want to do any of that. Black didn't play h5, so he could play bishop d7 and slowly develop, and then that's super complicated. Instead, he played h4 right away, attacking the queen on g3. The queen doesn't have a lot of good squares, and if you move your queen randomly, you're just going to lose this pawn, because the queen and bishop defend this pawn. So, like queen f3, I just take the pawn. Okay, so he played queen d3, which puts pressure on the d pawn still. And the idea is if you take, which is frankly terrible, then I check, and I win your rook in the corner, always sack the exchange. Unfortunately, we sack the exchange, but that's too annoying. So you just play rook d1, rook d8, and Papa John's. Okay. So you can't play de, and if Black does nothing, White's going to play rook fe1 and bishop f3, and Black's king is stupid. Black's rook is less stupid because he played h5, h4, so his rook can come out. So Jan forced matters. He played g5, which is excellent. Now, if the bishop moves randomly, I don't know, here, somewhere. Okay, then I can take this with the pawn or the queen. They're both good. The engine says they're equally good. So I don't know which is better. But the point is, if you play queen d8 check, like trying to win my rook again, I can defend my rook because I played g5. So the Black's just a pawn up here, and White still has all these idiotic pawns. Yay, $5. Thanks, Just a Box and a Cage. You're the best. Okay, so after g5, White doesn't really want to move his bishop back because this pawn is hanging. So now it's time to take everything. So takes. Now, as Robert Hess pointed out on the live broadcast, this pawn would prefer to be here. And if you ask why, you're going to find out in two moves. Okay, because this gives White a target, and White can open the position up and try to use his extra pawn. Now, White's a pawn up, but, that's his extra pawn. So, okay. And in the Nimzo Indian Queen C2 variation, which I play with White, this pawn structure happens in one of the variations. And that's also a draw, but Black has to defend carefully. Okay, bishop e6, good move. And he plays f4. And if you play g4, I'll play f5, and your bishop's going to go back there. And your g pawn's hanging and so forth. You have to open it up now. And that weakens the h4 pawn. That's why he wants the pawn here. Just play g6 and chill. Okay, so f4, that's why Ding waited to trade on d6. Now he has this extra option. So he played king e7. He took. And now this pawn is indefensible. So he played the move h3. And now g4. And what White wants, which Fabi pointed out like 10 moves ago, White wants to trade all four rooks and then go take this pawn and win. Because that pawn's no good. However, it's defended, and it's not easy to attack. And while you're attacking that, Black's going to attack these three pawns. So dynamically, the game is about equal, but you would prefer White because humans want to have an extra pawn rather than not have an extra pawn. And White's plan of winning this pawn almost gives him a winning position. If Black wins one of these pawns, he's not really winning, he just got his pawn back. But if White wins this pawn, then all right, serious. Pass pawn. Okay, so it's better to have White because White has more pawns and this pawn is weak. But if both sides play correctly, it should be a draw. Okay, rook c8. The rook's going to come to c5. He played king f2. Rook goes to c5. And he played a4. And then I got a donation. $5.01. You're the best. Thanks, PD Boltok. That's more than 5. Hopefully this starts a war. $5.02. Okay. So this pawn is very difficult to defend on a2 because rook a5, rook takes a2. You don't really want to play rook d2. Then your c pawn needs to be defended again. This rook could come here, and this rook here, and here. And your rook on d2 is very passive. So he decided to play a4, and he could defend the pawn with bishop to d1, which defends both of his pawns. Then all of his pawns are defended. And there's a loose arrow. Okay. So after a4, which is okay, he played rook a5. He played the aforementioned bishop to d1. And now it's very difficult to find a winning plan for white. I want to take this pawn, but I don't know how. If I play like king here, pawn here, rook here, I mean, the g5 pawn's hanging with check. If I put my bishop on f1 and it takes 7 moves to win it, I'm already giving this away. Then I have a passed pawn. So I don't know how to win the h-pawn. If I don't win the h-pawn, I don't know how to win. So it's not easy to win. White has a pawn up, and black's not going to win it back unless white gives it back. But it's not easy to figure out how to win because white's extra pawn is sort of silly. Okay, he played b6, very solid. King g3, rook h6. Now, the point of rook h6 is he's protecting his bishop extra, and he also has the idea of moving his rook back and forth on a dark square, so the bishop can't attack it. It's not clear what white should do, even if black just does this. So he played rook e4, which pins the bishop. And now the only winning idea that anybody could see that wasn't taking this pawn was to put a white rook on either f5 or d5, attacking this rook. And this rook doesn't really want to go here. And you may be saying, well, you can't do that. My bishop's here. Exactly. So he plays rook here, pinning the bishop. Then he'll play rook here. In the live commentary, Hess and Caruana were mainly focusing on this rook to here and then rook f5, which is the same. And if it was white's turn to move, then white could play rook to d5. Now, imagine I play rook here, which he didn't play, with the same idea, rook f5. Now I play king f8. You can't play rook d8 check because you played this rook over. You can't take my bishop because black smartly played rook h6, previous move, defending his bishop. You can't play rook f5 because you take it. So now I don't know what white does. White does nothing. So that's why he didn't play the Hess Caruana way, because it doesn't work. Now this way, I'm going to play rook d5, and he played king f8, which stops rook d5 because you can take it. Now I have rook d8 check. That's the extra advantage of leaving the rook on the d file. Although you could argue that's not great, so all white could do. King, and if you play king to e7, then the rook will go to d5, and then white has an advantage. Okay, so he played rook a8, and in this position, Fabi and Hess thought black would play bishop d7 because they didn't see a better move. And this move should lead to a draw. There's nothing wrong with that move. And instead he played rook here. Fabi thought it was good for white to exchange this doubled pawn for this pawn. And Jan literally didn't care. Jan's like, yeah, whatever. There's no pawns on the board, so I'm going to draw. Okay. And obviously, if you take with the rook, frankly, then after you're here, white's a pawn up in an endgame. And this pawn isn't very weak because you can't attack it. Conversely, the way that was played, bishop takes c4. Now the bishop's going to go back somewhere, and rook takes c3 check is going to be played. So in this position, the commentators thought white would play rook to e3, defending his pawn before it gets attacked. And he played rook e7, surprising the commentators. But it doesn't really matter. There's very few pawns on the board. White's pawns are all weak too. So it's very difficult to win with these terrible pawns. And this position, the idea is if you play bishop to d5, I will play rook e3, defending my pawn. And there are positions where if you play bishop e6, you have to be careful because the f-pawn's pinned. So that's risky. So he just played rook here, giving up his h-pawn and winning this pawn by force. And, all the pawns are going to be won. So in this position, if I was white, I wouldn't have played white's move because I wouldn't have looked at it. This move wouldn't occur to me. So I wouldn't have looked at it. But if I was white, I would take this pawn because it's a pawn. I'm trying to take that pawn the whole game. Then bishop e6. And black's rooks are just super active now. You can't take this because I take with the rook. Rook takes c3 is coming. And white's king is just wide open. Black's position is perfectly reasonable. And this is actually no winning chances for white. White has this extra pawn. But with his king so exposed, and these pawns can be attacked, and the rooks are separated now, it's nothing. Okay, it's just going to be a draw. So he played a move I wouldn't have looked at, rook 7, e5. The idea is white wants to trade rooks, then play rook e3, and take this and be up a pawn. In the position I showed you, there were a lot of rooks on the board, so white's king was a little iffy. With one rook on the board, okay, my king's perfectly fine. And unfortunately, this fails tactically, although if you don't play the tactic that draws immediately, it doesn't matter. It's still going to be a draw. But you trade, and you have this cute move, bishop b3. And the idea is if you take, I check and take the bishop. But, okay, everything's hanging. White's position is hanging. So white has to take, check, takes. Now white has rook b5, hoping that black will blunder and go into this lost king and pawn endgame. And you can see the thermometer, he just got very excited. Okay. So instead of trading rooks and losing, he played rook a3. Fabi thought that white might play rook b4 here to keep the tension, but okay, white can't do anything, so he took his free pawn. And in this position, everybody knew it was a draw, and they thought white would play 6 or 7 more moves and they'd agree to a draw, because it's an extra pawn, but it's 2 against 1 on the same side. But Jan, showing why he's playing in the World Championship and leading, made the game a draw immediately. So instead of defending this, and I've won positions like this against players who were like 2200, 2100 in slow chess, he just played f5. That just gets rid of the pawns. So you have to take it because nothing else to do. Rook f4, and if you play f6, I take it. If you play rook here, I play king here and take it. And this pawn's not going to win. Now, white would be winning if Jan was white and Jan was going this way. If you're like, which way the pawns are going? If they're going this way, then white's winning. Okay, so the game went to king versus king. And they agreed to a draw. Maybe the game is already drawn. You don't have to agree to it. The game is a draw by force. Although Ding could have got the opposition with king h3. By the way, or king f3. By the way, this is king versus king, and it was only 45 moves. That's not a lot of moves for king versus king. I mean, because you have to trade 30 pieces. So of the 90 moves that were made, 45 by each, 30 of them were captures. So that's a big percentage. So the game was very well played. I saw no mistakes by either side. I really don't even see any improvements. I don't want to say, oh, Ding could have done this and Jan could have done that. I don't know. It seemed like they both played well. The engine never said anybody had a big advantage. It said white was a pawn up, but, and the better engine you have, the more core and, ply and all that, the closer to equal it's going to say. If you have a bad engine, it'll probably say white had a big advantage. But the better engine you get, the further you look, it's like, all right, never mind, this is a draw. And Jan never seemed really worried, and Ding never seemed like he was thinking he was going to win. Ooh, coffee. So that game was pretty well played. White got a small advantage out of the opening. Jan defended properly, sacrificed a pawn. White had a bad pawn structure. White tried to press in the endgame, but there wasn't much going on. Thanks, Trying to Learn, for gifting a sub. Do they have a 40-move draw rule? They do. They do have a 40-move draw rule. That is correct. So that was a pretty good game, I thought. It wasn't their most interesting game, but it could have been. There were variations that could have happened that didn't, where it's still equal, but, it would have been scary. Rickety D6. These draws are boring. No, the draws aren't boring. No. This was maybe the most boring draw was game 3. Game 3 was the most boring draw. Black equalized and nothing happened. Here, Black equalized eventually, but super GMs would always take White this game, like in every position. But White pressed and Black defended correctly. So the truth hurts. That game was only 3 hours, sort of like the Braves game I'm going to today with Archer. The game starts 1:20, 1:30, something like that. Go Braves.